So did you know that we can use Vela to create glitchy delay textures without using the late reverb section? So in this example, instead of using this as a traditional reverb, we're going to utilize the early reflection section and just focus on using it as sort of like a delay effect, but for some kind of specialized glitchy delays that we could use to potentially add some texture. So I've got a little trance drum loop and a bass line going here. And I've got just the initialized version of Vela on the drums. Let's solo the drums just for a minute here, and let's turn Vela on. So remember, you can initialize the preset by clicking the little 3 lines icon here and then going to Init Preset. So I'm just working off the initialized preset. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to first turn off the late reverb. I'm just going to turn that off entirely so we're only hearing the early reflections. Now, in most traditional reverbs, you'll have these 2 sections, right? You'll have an early reflections, which is the initial delays or the initial reflections of the sound waves as they reflect off the surfaces if you're in a real space, or the virtual surfaces in the case of a reverb like this. And then the late reverb is going to be more like the tail end of the reverb. So we're just removing that entirely and just focusing on the early reflections here. I've got my mix output at 100%. So we're just going to use this to create some texture. Now, the early reflections have several different presets in Vela. There are actually a few that are just straight up delays. So let's just choose this one that's called delay. Let's just take a listen to what it sounds like. I'm going to turn the level of the early reflection section up a little bit so we can hear that a bit more clearly. And you can hear it just kind of sounds like a fast delay. Now, we can't control this with tempo signatures or anything like that. We don't have time resolutions to sync it to tempo, but we have the size control, which is going to act sort of like a delay time. So a larger size means more space between each of the different delay taps that we're hearing. A smaller size means less space and therefore more kind of glitchiness and pitchiness. Let's turn that level up a little bit. Watch our output, just make sure we're not clipping. I like the sound of that. And then we can go in here, for example, to the density control, maybe reduce the density so that we're utilizing fewer delay taps. We can also use filtering. If we go to the filter envelope here, let's turn the filter on for the early reflections. Currently, we're using a low-pass filter, so we can pull this cutoff point down at the beginning. Because we're not using the late reverb, we don't really need to worry too much about the rest of the nodes or the rest of the envelope time here. Really just that first one is what we're going to hear the effect of. So we're low passing it the lower we bring this. We can also apply a high pass filter. Let's turn it on. We have a separate envelope for that. So it's kind of like we're doing a high pass or a low cut, and then a low pass or a high cut, and just sort of fine tuning the frequencies we want to utilize for this glitch effect. If we want to sort of ignore the filter altogether, let's turn that off, turn it off here. We can also utilize the pre and post EQ curves, which are really helpful for this type of glitch effect creation for tone shaping. So for example, right now that kick is pretty prominent in the drum loop, and it's really driving the glitchiness of this fast glitch delay. Maybe I want to remove that, so we'll use the pre-EQ. We'll change this first band to the low cut, and maybe we'll do a steeper slope here, 24 decibels, and we'll just kind of scoop the kick out so it's not driving the delay so much. Nice. Let's maybe go to the post EQ, bring out some of these higher frequencies. Now let's add this in as a texture. So we're going to go to the mix control. I'm going to set the mix to 50%. Let's right click it and let's maybe change it. If it was in classic mix mode, go ahead and change it to send and return mix mode. That means that at 50%, we're hearing full volume of both the dry and the wet signals. From 0 to 50%, we hear the full volume of the dry signal. It only starts to reduce the volume of the dry when we go above 50%. And then from 50% downwards, it reduces the volume of the wet signal, but everything above 50% gives us pretty much full wet. So at 50%, we're going to get a nice even blend of the two, but they will both be full volume. Let's bring the mix down a little bit. So So I primarily hear my drums, but we're getting this cool glitchy texture over the top of it. You can play with the pitch of that and the timing of it with the size control. Let's hear it with the bass. So blending in that nice texture over our drums, we can of course use the level of the early reflections to pull it down a little bit, maybe go to our EQ, tweak it a little bit more, cut some more lows out of that. This is the pre-EQ. Get this kind of glitchy noise texture over the top. I like that a lot. We could bring the effect out altogether, just to have the dry drums. And we could perhaps introduce this texture in a build or a transition or something like this. We could automate the mix parameter. Get this glitched out mix of the drums coming in on a transition and then pull it back out. Very, very cool. So utilizing only the early reflections, we can get some very cool glitched out delay type effects.